crash of an Atlantic Southeast Airlines flight. Did a broken propeller prevent the crew from saving the plane? On the American agenda, how one airline is now teaching its pilots to deal with catastrophic events in midair. And how those Japanese investors who waded into American real estate learned their lesson the hard way, taking a multi-billion-dollar bath.
From ABC, this is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings. Sitting in tonight, Diane Sawyer.
Good evening. Investigators have spent the day combing through a field in Carrollton, Georgia, looking for clues to the cause of yesterday's airplane crash. The death toll has gone up. Of the 29 people on board the Atlantic Southeast Airlines flight, 5 have now died and at least 8 more are in critical condition. We begin our coverage with ABC's Mike Van Fremd.
One of the first to arrive at the crash scene yesterday and see the dazed and injured passengers was a Georgia State Patrol officer who recorded the scene with his dashboard video camera as he drove toward the burning plane. Today, 20 investigators from the National Transportation Safety Board are examining the crash site. Early this morning, they located the flight data recorder and cockpit voice recorder. Sources who have heard the tape tell ABC News that the cockpit crew remained calm as the plane was crash landing. The focus of the investigation appears to be the propeller blade on the left engine.
One of the propeller blades on that assembly was discovered to be broken.
Safety board officials say they are still trying, but have so far been unable to find the portion of the blade that apparently broke away from the left propeller. Surviving passengers have reported hearing a jarring noise from the area of the left engine.
It was a bang, it just ripped the prop, and then it went into the wing and tore up the sheet metal on the wing.
Looked out the left side of the plane, and there was no prop on the motor anymore.
Investigators say the loss of one engine should not be enough to cause the twin-engine plane to crash.
This plane was certificated to fly with the power coming from only one engine.
Investigators analyzing the path of the crash say that the commuter plane was dipping to the left just before it clipped the treetops. It hit the ground, skidded, and burst into flames after scattering airplane parts across the field. The head of the Federal Aviation Administration came to the crash site to praise 45-year-old pilot Edwin Ganaway, who did not survive.
One could conclude that the pilot was trying to reach this empty field and probably did an excellent job in allowing a majority of the passengers to survive.
Yesterday, rescue crews tried to reach the pilot who had worked so hard to save everyone else. Mike Van Fremd, ABC News, Carrollton, Georgia.
This is Lisa Stark. Investigators here in Carrollton removed the left propeller from the crash site. It will be sent to Washington for analysis. This 4-blade propeller was found missing a large section of one of its blades. That section may have come off in flight. Aviation experts say that could have led to problems so severe it may have been impossible for the pilot to keep the plane in the air.
Just losing part of a propeller is going to cause a tremendous amount of imbalance and shaking in the airplane, but somehow it may also cause additional drag. And if that drag is too great on one side, the other engine at full power can't overcome it, then the airplane is going to start losing altitude, and eventually they're going to have to put it on the ground somewhere.
In fact, this very plane had to land on one engine in 1993 after a problem with the right propeller. And there have been other problems with this type of propeller manufactured by Hamilton Standard. A malfunctioning propeller was blamed for the 1991 Brunswick, Georgia crash that killed former Senator John Tower and 22 others. Accident investigators determined there was a design flaw in the propeller unit. It has since been corrected. In 1990, the FAA ordered a modification to prevent these propellers from spinning too fast. The problem could have led to total failure of one or both engines. And just 2.5 weeks ago, another plane like this one lost a propeller blade shortly before landing at the airport in Luxembourg. The plane managed to land safely. Although it is far too early to pinpoint the cause of yesterday's accident, investigators will surely want to know whether there is a connection between these two mishaps. Lisa Stark, ABC News, Carrollton, Georgia.
Later on the American agenda, teaching pilots to deal with imminent disaster in the sky. Also, U.S. troops going a long way to make sure Saddam Hussein gets the message. And the purple passion of New Orleans in the summer.
This is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings. Brought to you by Lexus.
From the Pentagon today, the latest assessment of what Iraq is really up to. U.S. officials have been saying it has detected a pattern of unusual Iraqi troop exercises, which is why the U.S. has beefed up its military presence in the Middle East. But is this the whole story? ABC's John McWethy has been investigating.
American troops were loading up in Texas and heading for the Persian Gulf today. They have been told it is an exercise that is meant to send a message to the Iraqi leadership.
I just hope they realize that we're back over there and that we're watching them and that we're not going to let them step out of line.
But today, the Pentagon seemed to be softening its assessment of just how big a threat Iraq might be posing.
There have been some unusual deployments of Iraqi military forces. Nothing that leads us to believe that any invasion is underway or planned.
There certainly has been no major movement that gives anyone at this point any kind of cause for alarm.
Then why is the U.S. sending troops to Kuwait for a surprise exercise? Why have 2 aircraft carriers been moved within striking distance of Iraq? And why are 13 cargo ships steaming toward the Persian Gulf with enough tanks, ammunition, and food to keep 17,000 Marines fighting for a month? The Pentagon denies it is overreacting, pointing out that the combination of small Iraqi maneuvers with the political bombshell created by 2 high-level defections was more than enough to make U.S. intelligence analysts nervous.
It's always wise to take prudent steps that enable us to react to whatever actions are taken.
This is all happening at a time when Saddam Hussein is in the middle of a charm offensive, suddenly cooperating with UN weapons inspectors. Pentagon officials are not convinced. Though final decisions have not yet been made, it now appears likely that the U.S. will hold continuous military exercises in Kuwait for the next several months, especially if the Kuwaitis agree to pay for it all. John McWethy, ABC News, the Pentagon.
In Bosnia today, Serbian forces targeted Sarajevo again with their heavy weapons. 6 people were killed and 38 wounded, including some members of the UN Protection Force, whose observation post took a direct hit. This time, the new United Nations Rapid Reaction Force retaliated, firing its heavy weapons at the Serbs. Sarajevo under fire is a familiar sight these days and nights, but we have a report now from a place in the former Yugoslavia that has escaped attention. A place to which Muslims, Croats, and Serbs go, and from which they pray they'll return. ABC's Sheila McVicker is on the island of Obonjan.
It was once a summer camp for children, and they still play the games of summer here. But Obonjan Island is now a transit point, not home, and to some it even feels like a prison. There are nearly 1,000 people here, most of them Muslims and Croats forced to leave their homes by war. Some have been here for 3 years. When refugees are lucky enough to leave the island, it is most often to another country. The Shukos family have just found out that they will go to the United States, to Phoenix, and they are scared.
Why are you afraid?
I don't know. This new life for us.
But there are refugees at this camp whose future is more uncertain. They are Serbs, expelled from their homes not long ago. The Serbs, all elderly or ill, were too weak to join the exodus towards Belgrade. Their new Muslim and Croatian neighbors want little to do with them. This Muslim refugee had once been held prisoner by the Serbs.
Now the Serbs realize what ethnic cleansing is all about. Thousands of us had to move. It makes me happy to see them forced out too.
Since May alone, nearly 300,000 people have been forced from their homes in the former Yugoslavia. The largest group were Serbs from the Krajina, 140,000 of them. In retaliation, Croats in Serb-held territory were this week forced from their homes.
The longer the war goes on, the less likely it is that a lot of these people are ever going to return.
With so many villages cleansed of one ethnic group or the other, this island camp has become one of the few places where Croats, Muslims, and Serbs live together, even if not by choice. Sheila McVicker, ABC News, Obonjan Island, Croatia.
And a note now on how the war in Bosnia has devastated one home here in America. In Arlington, Virginia today, the funeral of Robert Frasure, one of the 3 American diplomats who was killed over the weekend on the road to Sarajevo. His daughter, Sarah, delivered a eulogy. She is only 16.
My dad was on a peaceful mission in the former Yugoslavia to help save people's lives, and that I will have to live with his death for the rest of my life. But it helps to know that I'm not alone in my almost unbearable suffering, and that one day I won't wake up with a tear-stained face, but with a face full of new hope for myself, my family, and the future.
We'll be back in a moment. In business news, the Federal Reserve has passed up a chance to lower interest rates. During a regular meeting, top policymakers at the Fed took no action today. Analysts say there are signs that the economy is beginning to pick up without the help of easier credit. The other economic news today is about one of the biggest for sale signs America has ever seen. Remember how Japanese corporations plowed their money into U.S. real estate during the 1980s, while a lot of Americans complained that the U.S. was letting rich Japanese take over? Well, what a difference a decade makes. Here's ABC's Bill Redeker.
It is a sell-off of staggering proportions. In California, Pebble Beach Golf Course sold at a loss of $340 million. In New York City, Rockefeller Center was thrown into bankruptcy after losing $600 million. In less than a decade, Japanese investors who once paid top dollar for scores of American trophy properties are now selling many of them at discount prices. In the 1980s, they spent about $77 billion on U.S. real estate. By the end of this year, they will have sold $20 billion worth and lost about 50 cents on every dollar. Nowhere is the fire sale more dramatic than here in Hawaii, where luxury hotels, office buildings, condominiums, and golf courses have been sold for a fraction of their original cost. For example, it cost Mitsubishi Bank more than $400 million to develop the extravagant Waikoloa Hotel, with its fleet of a dozen canal boats, monorail tram, 3 pools, and 1,200 rooms. But it was recently sold for only $55 million. To build the Ko'olau Golf Course, which is rated the most difficult course in America, the Minami Sports Group spent $120 million. The company has until early next year to pay its back taxes, or it will be auctioned off. Starting bid, a mere $900,000. Japanese investors and lenders got into this mess when real estate peaked in the late 80s. They did not anticipate the collapse of their stock market back home and a sharp decline in real estate prices here.
The classic aftermath of an overbuilding boom, a lot more capacity created than the market could absorb in a short period of time, at a time when the economy was turning south.
The sell-off has created bargains for American investors. A pension fund representing Los Angeles County employees just purchased this Waikiki condominium. It cost Sukamto Holding Corporation more than $200 million to build. It was sold to the pension fund for only $50 million. That's 25 cents on the dollar. Hawaii today is littered with empty lots abandoned by Japanese investors. A $3 billion planned resort community that was supposed to look like this attracted only one hotel. Signs promise more, but vacant development sites tell the real story. One developer of luxury condominiums is now building affordable townhouses instead.
I had to redesign the housing units and the price to match the local market.
Japanese investors didn't take over the U.S. real estate market after all. And contrary to their long-established practice of hanging on to their investments, they now can't wait to unload what was once their American dream. Bill Redeker, ABC News, Honolulu.
On Wall Street today, the Dow Jones Industrial Average gained more than 5.5 points, closing at 4620. Trading was moderate. On the NASDAQ market, stocks also gained about 5.5 points. In a moment, the American agenda, teaching pilots to do the impossible. On the American agenda tonight, in the wake of this latest plane crash in Georgia, we're going to focus on the broader issue of airline safety. At all the major airlines, pilots undergo training for what you might call routine emergencies. For example, the loss of cabin pressure or the failure of the landing gear to come down. But pilots have not been trained for the worst-case scenarios until now. Once again, here is Lisa Stark.
At 11,000 feet, a United Airlines 757 is in trouble.
Just hang on to it.
The plane's nose is angled too high. The jetliner is stalling and is about to tumble 2 miles to the ground.
Okay, now there's your power. You got your nose down, your airspeed's back, but it's still in a buffet. Push forward. Don't pump it. That's it. That's it. I wanted you to feel that.
This emergency is not real. It is taking place in a simulator, part of a new training program at United Airlines. By next year, each of United's 8,000 pilots will have had at least 4 hours of training in emergencies so unlikely they may never experience them in flight.
Clear for takeoff, runway 8, United 1606.
The pilots are learning to recover from extreme positions called unusual attitudes, such as steep banks, rollovers, the worst possible situations, emergencies where pilots can easily lose control of an airplane.
What we'd like to do is train pilots within, say, the first 5 seconds or to 10 seconds to be doing the correct thing, and more importantly, to not be doing the wrong thing.
In the past, pilots were simply told to avoid getting the airplane into extreme positions. But as recent tragedies have shown, these situations are not always avoidable. Last September, U.S. Air Flight 427 flipped over, crashing near the Pittsburgh airport. 1 month later, an American Eagle ATR plane rolled belly up, then slammed into the ground.
Now pull up. Pull up. Pull up.
There is no way of knowing whether United's training would have made a difference in these crashes, but the airline feels it gives pilots an extra edge.
There's no doubt that this training helps, because being a pilot is like being an athlete. The more you can practice, the better you are.
United's advanced training has caught the attention of federal aviation officials and other airlines. They have come to Denver to take a look at the program. Some in the industry believe that this training should be required for all pilots.
If there is one chance in 10 million that an airline crew might find itself upside down or in a wild bank, that we need to train all of us to know instantly what to do if that happens. That is a matter of safety.
TWA, American, and Delta Airlines have all started programs similar to United's.
You're going to feel acceleration, guys.
But there is some concern in the aviation industry about whether simulator training is realistic enough.
We don't know that what the pilot is going to see in the simulation, is that really going to be what he's going to see in the airplane? We want to make sure that we've got the right techniques involved in training from the get-go.
A private flying school in California believes pilots need to experience emergencies like this rollover in flight. It has developed an in-flight training program which is available to the airline. The Federal Aviation Administration does not require training in recovery from extreme positions, even though the National Transportation Safety Board has been recommending it for 25 years. But airlines themselves are beginning to realize they have little to lose and a lot to gain.
We're expecting a smooth flight today.
By making their pilots ready for anything they and their passengers may face. This is Lisa Stark for the American Agenda.
When we come back, Bourbon Street, jazz, and Purple Martin. On vacation in Wyoming, President Clinton turned his attention to whitewater today, in a manner of speaking. The president of the first family went on a whitewater raft trip. He's the one in the straw hat there, shooting the rapids of the Snake River. The president's people, of course, prefer to call today's activity simply river rafting. And finally tonight, a welcome visitor to New Orleans. The city attracts huge crowds every winter for Mardi Gras, but in the summertime, New Orleans makes way for the birds. One particular bird, the purple martin. On the theory, as ABC's Charles Murphy reports, that any creature that eats my enemy is my friend.
All summer, New Orleans is a twitter. Every evening, the largest flock of purple martins in the world, 200,000 birds, congregate in this city to roost. Their favorite watering hole, Lake Pontchartrain Causeway.
It's just as exciting to see it now as it is the first time I saw it.
10 years ago, Carlisle Rogelio saw a flock of martins headed toward the bridge and discovered their favorite spot. He's been back many times since. But he also noticed many birds being killed by cars. So he mounted a campaign to get the Causeway Commission to put up protective fencing. It worked.
I'd say that it's eliminated probably in the neighborhood of 90+% of the birds that were killed.
In return, these little birds protect people. The reason so many purple martins come here is because there are many, many mosquitoes here. Like a lot of visitors to New Orleans, they come here to eat. Once they're here, they've got to have a place to stay. So John LeBure created a condo complex.
I'm helping them out while I got the time left in the city. And they need it bad.
His houses have turrets, balconies, multiple apartments, and easy access for cleaning.
This is my idea. Look at this. How you like that?
Fledglings are learning to fly. This one wasn't ready. John scooped it up and put it back in the apartment. In a day or two, it'll fly to the bridge.
Look, Ashley. All of a sudden, they're just here.
It's showtime. New Orleans has always been known for its tourist attractions, the restaurants, the Mardi Gras, and now the Purple Martins. Charles Murphy, ABC News, New Orleans.
And that's our report on World News tonight. Nightline is up later. I'm Diane Sawyer. Good night.
This has been a presentation of ABC News. More Americans get their news from ABC News than from any other source.